that it's safe to say at this point that I'm a professional herbalist. I have been practicing for over 10 years. I have my own herbalism school and I work with herbal clients. So yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say. And as a professional herbalist, I'm noticing something really interesting. Now, I work with two main types of people. The first one is like people who need help in the clinic managing their complex health ailments. They want to do it either just with herbs or maybe in conjunction with medications. And then the second group of people that I work with are people who are more into prevention, people who are learning to become the kind of person who use herbs first instead of as a last resort. And in both of these groups, there is one big mistake that I'm seeing over and over again, especially with people who are new to herbalism. And it's so common that if I don't warn you about it, you are very likely to make that mistake as well. And it's absolutely going to keep you from getting the root cause healing that you are looking for. And that mistake is thinking herbs can be direct replacements for pharmaceuticals. So today I'm going to break down why that is a problem and the way to get out of it so that we are actually using herbs the right way instead of like little green pills, which is really just not even how they work. And it's just going to set us up for failure. Now, a lot of people will think something like, oh, well, I'm having migraines. So instead of taking Excedrin migraine every day, I'm going to take feverfew and I'm just going to call it a day. I'm just going to replace this over-the-counter medicine or this pharmaceutical with an herb. And honestly, it makes a lot of sense. We are trained to see medicine in a very particular way because of our medical culture. Medications are going to target very specific symptoms. They're highly concentrated, they are standardized, they're going to work the same way every time. It's often one and done. You match the pill to the problem, you take it, and then you're good. But herbs do not work like that. First of all, they're not as concentrated or as laser focused as pharmaceuticals, and we don't take them the same way and we don't use them the same way. Now, with herbs, we're often taking something preventatively instead of trying to manage the fifth migraine of the week. We might be supporting a process of the body that just isn't functioning well, like when we're taking bitters to stimulate gastric secretions instead of suppressing acid reflux. We're just trying to make the entire system work better. Or maybe we are supporting a fever so that it breaks sooner instead of trying to suppress the symptom of a fever. So we're actually working with herbs in a completely different way. We might be targeting the same thing as a medication or an over-the-counter medicine, but we are approaching the issue in a completely different way. And if this idea of working with herbs differently than pharmaceuticals is new to you and a little bit overwhelming, it's actually exactly why I created the 7-day Apothecary course. We go over 10 incredibly common herbs that you can actually start using right away to switch out your medicine cabinet, and for things that most people will grab over-the-counter medications for, like our colds and our flus and our sleep issues and our digestive problems. And you can get that class at herbalistkristen.com/7-day apothecary. You're going to learn exactly how to work with herbs in a way that supports your body rather than seeing herbs as tiny little green pills. And once you start looking at plants this way, again, you're going to see that we are addressing the same problem, but we are approaching the problem in a completely different way. And this is because herbs are not pharmaceuticals. Herbs are whole plants. They are not isolated compounds. They are going to contain dozens, sometimes hundreds of chemical constituents. They're going to have multiple effects. They're going to have primary actions. They're going to have secondary actions, which we do want to consider. And they're going to shift how multiple systems in the body are functioning. And that's why we don't just say this herb is for headaches and then call it good. We match an herb to a person's unique needs. And if we don't, the results are probably going to be mediocre, or we accidentally might make things worse. And we see that with medications all the time. You give someone a pharmaceutical, it has side effects, it comes with a downward spiral of needing to take a new medication to manage the effects of the first, and then so on. If you choose herbs the same way that you're choosing an over-the-counter medication or a pharmaceutical, just matching it to the primary symptom, you are missing the bigger picture of how nuanced herbs are and how nuanced you are. And there are two big problems with that approach. The first one is that you miss the full range of effects an herb can have. Effects that might not actually agree with the person in front of you. You might pick rhodiola for mood and focus, which it's really great for. But because rhodiola is also incredibly drying, it could aggravate UTIs. It can aggravate constipation or dry skin. It could even trigger anxiety and other mood issues. Or you might choose an herb for digestion that also speeds up detoxification. And that's fine for some people, but if you're also on certain medications that get processed by the liver too quickly as a result, you're going to create other issues. Now, the other problem with choosing an herb to just match the primary symptom is that you are actually missing the opportunity to address the root cause, and that is how plants are going to work the best. Treating herbs like green pills keeps you in the symptom-chasing mode instead of working towards long-term healing, which I know is what you actually want. And that's honestly the biggest difference between herbalism and conventional medicine. We don't stop at what is the symptom. We look at the whole person. We look at their patterns. We look at how everything connects. And then we match the plant to the person, not to the symptom. Because herbalists are not medical practitioners. We don't treat illness. Herbalists support people. And so here are the top 5 things that we want to think about before deciding what herb we are going to work with. Even if I have an idea of what herb is probably going to be the most helpful, I still work through a couple of layers before I make my final choice. Each layer is going to build on the last, so that by the time we land on the herb, it's not just a random green pill. It's the right fit for that person in this time. So the first thing that we want to think about is, what is the full picture here? We don't want to just look at the main issue, but we look at everything surrounding it. How long has this been going on? What was happening when it started? How are you sleeping? What are you eating? How is your digestion and your bowel movements? Is there support in your life? Are you in community? What is your skin doing? What's your family history? What kind of things were you experiencing as a child? Do you remember being sick then too? And this is why an herbal intake, when you're working with a new client, actually lasts 90 minutes to 2 hours, because we are getting a full picture. We want the whole story before we just start jumping to whatever herb is going to help with that issue. Now, once we see this big picture, and then we move on to our second consideration, where we're looking at the plants themselves, but specifically, we want to think, what are their primary and secondary actions? Sometimes those extra actions that an herb has is exactly why we pick them, or why we don't pick them. Like if someone has anxiety and digestive tension, a nervine that is also a bitter might be the perfect fit. But if those secondary effects are going to clash with what's going on in their body, then it's off the table. Now, from there, the third thing we want to consider is, what is this person's constitution? What are the baseline tendencies of the person in front of me? If someone already runs cold and damp, giving them a cooling and moistening herb is going to make them really uncomfortable, especially if they have to take it for a long period of time. Everything we do in herbalism is about bringing the person back into balance long term, and we don't want to sacrifice those energetics just to get the action of a single herb. And of course, that leads us into our fourth consideration, which are the energetics. Is the herb warming or cooling? Is the herb moistening or drying? Is the condition itself hot or cold or dry or damp? We are always matching the energetics of the herb to the patterns that we are seeing in the person. And then the fifth thing that we want to consider is going to be safety and synergy. How is this herb going to interact with their medications? Is it going to need other herb allies to work best? And this is where we keep things safe and we make the whole plan more effective, because as you can see, sometimes someone needs an herb that doesn't really jive with their constitution that well. So can we add other herbs to that to mitigate those negative effects that they're likely to experience? And then I'm going to add a bonus consideration here, because I think it's really important for you to know. So the sixth thing, the bonus thing that we want to consider, is what else does this person need? We always want to be looking at the bigger picture. What else needs to shift so that the body can heal and that so the herbs can actually do their best work? Because the reason that you have gut issues probably isn't because you don't have enough marshmallow root. You might not be getting enough bitter compounds or things that stimulate digestive secretions. You might be eating foods that are exacerbating gut issues. It could be lack of movement. It might be something that you need follow-up testing with your doctor for. And so there's so much more to consider when we're working with herbs than just what does this do and matching an herb to a symptom. And I know that it might sound a little bit overwhelming at first, but when we start working with plant medicine, all of this really does become second nature. I assure you that it's really not as complicated as it sounds if you are learning herbalism in the right way. And so that just goes to say that if you only think of herbs and plants as direct replacements for pharmaceuticals, you're always going to get limited results. But when you really start to think holistically and see the patterns and see the person and you have a relationship with the plants already, that is actually when you start thinking like an herbalist. So in the next video, I am going to break down the exact tools and method that I use to see both the body and plants holistically so that you can avoid the trap of treating herbs like little green pills and start creating remedies that actually work. And it's going to be a really easy bridge to help you start thinking differently. So I will see you in the next video.